Silver Plume is not a town where people go to be found. It is a crack in the earth, where the sun dies early and the shadows have teeth. The granite walls of the canyon lean inward, squeezing the light out of the valley until all that is left is the gray, suffocating weight of the Rockies. They say the mountains have memories, but in this part of Colorado, those memories are made of cold stone and missing people. You can feel the pressure change in your inner ear the moment you step off the interstate and into the silence of the high country. A silence that feels less like peace and more like a held breath. In 1987, a man named Tom Young owned a small bookstore in the heart of the village. A quiet man who kept his secrets tucked between the pages of his inventory. One September afternoon, he walked out of his shop with his dog, a backpack, and a pistol, and simply walked into the sky. No one saw him leave, and no one heard the mountain open up to take him. For months, the town looked at the peaks and wondered which one was hiding his bones. Until they found him a year later, tucked into a ridge miles away, a single bullet hole through his skull. But the mountain was not satisfied with one sacrifice. Enter Keith Reinhard, a man with a restless soul and a pen that was looking for a story to bleed into. He was a journalist from Chicago, a man who thought he could stare into the abyss of Silver Plume and come back with a bestseller. Keith moved into the very same shop Tom Young had vacated. He sat at the same desk and breathed the same stale air. He started writing a novel about a man who disappears, weaving the fiction of his mind into the cold reality of the floorboards beneath his feet. The locals watched him with narrowed eyes as he became obsessed with Tom's fate. He spent his nights pacing the small apartment above the shop, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the old wood, a sound that whispered his name in a language he could not yet understand. On the afternoon of August 7th, 1988, the air in Silver Plume was heavy with the scent of an approaching storm. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Keith walked into a local hangout and told his friends he was heading up Pendleton Mountain for a quick hike. He was wearing nothing but a light shirt, blue jeans, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. Equipment for a stroll in a city park. Not a confrontation with the jagged spine of the Continental Divide. He promised he would be back by nightfall to join them for a drink. As he started up the trail, the sun was already beginning its slow retreat behind the peaks, casting long, skeletal shadows across the scree slopes. People in town saw him heading toward the timberline. A small, solitary figure moving steadily into the mouth of the mountain. The clouds rolled in like a thick, gray shroud, swallowing the summit of Pendleton in a matter of minutes. The temperature plummeted, the air turning sharp and metallic as the first hint of mountain fog began to crawl down the slopes. Keith reached the high ridges where the trees grow twisted and stunted by the thin air, where the only sound is the crunch of gravel and the thrumming of your own heartbeat. Somewhere up there, the trail stopped being a path and started being a trap. He was seen one last time by a group of hikers near the summit. A man walking with purpose into the mist. They said he looked focused, almost driven, as if he were chasing something that only he could see through the veil of the clouds. By 10 o'clock that night, the seat at the bar remained empty, and the light in the apartment above the bookstore stayed dark. The mountain had gone silent. The storm had passed. But Keith Reinhard had not come down from the heights. The search began at dawn. A massive mobilization of men, machines, and hope that would soon turn into a grim realization. Hundreds of volunteers combed the slopes of Pendleton Mountain, their boots kicking up the dust of 1,000 years of isolation. Helicopters buzzed through the narrow canyons, their rotors echoing like frantic heartbeats against the unyielding stone. They used thermal imaging and high-powered optics, searching for any sign of a human shape against the gray and green expanse. But the mountain showed them nothing. Professional trackers brought in bloodhounds, dogs trained to find a scent in the most punishing terrain imaginable. The animals wandered the ridges, their tails dropping and their whimpers echoing in the thin air. They acted as if the scent of Keith Reinhard had simply evaporated into the ozone. There were no footprints in the soft patches of mud, no broken branches, and no discarded gear to mark his passage. It was a classic missing 411 scenario. A person vanishing in a high-altitude environment with no physical evidence left behind. Days turned into weeks, and the hope of finding Keith alive froze over and cracked. The searchers returned to the valley with empty hands and haunted looks, unable to explain how a grown man could disappear in a contained geographic area during a time of intense scrutiny. Some whispered about the old mines that honeycombed the mountain, dark shafts that dropped into the bowels of the earth. But the search crews had checked the entrances, and none showed signs of recent entry. The dust remained undisturbed. The secrets stayed buried. Then there is the theory of the geological glitch. The idea that certain places on this earth are not as solid as we believe. Silver Plume sits on a bed of high mineral rock, a conductive landscape that some believe can warp the very fabric of space and time under the right atmospheric conditions. Did Keith Reinhard walk into a fold in the mountain? A place where the 19th century and the 20th century rub against each other like tectonic plates. Perhaps he is still up there, walking a trail that exists only in the spaces between the rocks, forever looking for a way back to the light. The mountain doesn't just take your body, it takes your story. Keith came to Silver Plume to write about a disappearance. And in the end, he became the very mystery he was trying to solve. The mountain rewritten his ending in a language of stone and silence. Even now, decades later, hikers on Pendleton Mountain report a strange sensation of being followed when there is no one there. They speak of a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature and the feeling that the wind is trying to whisper a secret it can't quite remember. The case of Keith Reinhard remains an open wound in the history of the Colorado Rockies. It serves as a grim reminder that we are only guests in the high places, and the host is a hungry, ancient entity that does not take kindly to intruders. Before we conclude this descent into the dark, we must look at another shadow cast by the Colorado peaks. In 1999, 3-year-old Jared Adadero vanished on a trail in the Poudre Canyon while hiking with a group of adults. Despite being just feet away from his companions, he vanished instantly, and his remains were found years later on a cliffside that no toddler could have possibly climbed. Like Keith, Jared was taken by a mountain that seems to operate on its own set of physics. These are the stories that the travel brochures leave out. The stories of the people who went for a walk and never came back. Silver Plume still stands, a quiet village tucked into the folds of the earth, watching the peaks with a weary, knowing eye. The bookstore has changed hands. The residents have grown old, but the mountain remains unchanged. Vast, indifferent, and waiting. Next time you find yourself on a high ridge, and the fog starts to roll in like a cold hand reaching for your throat, don't look back. Just keep walking, and pray that the mountain hasn't decided that it's time for a new story. Because once the mountain takes an interest in you, there is no trail that leads home. There is only the silence, and the weight of the rock, and the long, cold dark. The logistics of the search were staggering. Over 700 people participated in the effort to find a single man in a few square miles of forest and rock. They checked the Devil's Gate, a narrow passage where the wind howls like a banshee, and they found nothing but the cold breath of the canyon. The investigators looked into Keith's life, searching for a reason for him to run, for a reason for him to stage a disappearance. But he had left his wallet, his car, and his very identity behind in that small apartment above the shop. A man doesn't run away without his shoes, and Keith was seen heading into the peaks in footwear that would have fallen apart within hours. The missing 411 pattern is clear here. The high altitude, the sudden weather change, the proximity to granite, and the absolute lack of physical evidence. It is as if the physical laws of our world are suspended in these hotspots, allowing the earth to reclaim its own. Some say Keith found what he was looking for, that he finally understood the lure of the mountains he had written about so fervently. But for those left behind, there is only the agonizing uncertainty of a life interrupted by an impossible silence. The mountains of Colorado are beautiful from a distance, but up close, they are a labyrinth of jagged edges and hidden depths. They do not forgive mistakes, and they do not return what they have taken. They simply endure, watching the centuries pass with a cold, stony indifference. Stay on the trail, watch the weather, and never, ever believe that you are alone in the high country. The mountain is always watching, and it is always, always hungry.